Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. This is our 6th year. Plainfield Parent Community Network has been hosting these events. This is actually our 15th event and our first one for the 2021-2022 school year, preparing your child to go back to school in the new normal. All of our presentations are online. You can find us at plainfieldpcn.org, including tonight's presentation. We are recording live. It will then be broadcasted to our website. We're hoping to get that up on the website later this evening. We will stop the recording for the question and answering session so that your questions are not recorded. But I would like to take this time to thank some of our sponsors, Plainfield Counseling Center, Seminar Marketing Pro, and Linden Oaks. Plainfield Parent Community Network is a volunteer network of parents, educators, and professionals committed to creating resources and opportunities for mental health supports and education in the Plainfield community, whose mission is to provide lifelong learning in our ever-changing society, working in collaboration with home, school, and community. I would say that last part definitely has played a significant role in our world these days. You can find us again on the web, plainfieldpcn.org, on Facebook at Plainfield Parent Community Network, on Twitter at PPCN Network 202, and any questions, comments, or concerns, you can email us at plainfieldpcn@gmail.com. Those are all of our logistics. I would ask now that you help me in welcoming two excellent speakers, Dorothy Kuklinski, clinical therapist at Linden Oaks Behavioral Health. Dorothy obtained her Master's in Art and Counseling Psychology degree from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, specializing in addictions counseling. She has experience working with adolescents ages 12 to 17, as well as adults in inpatient hospital and outpatient settings. Dorothy works to empower clients from a strength-based, non-judgmental perspective while supporting and guiding her clients to cope with their life stressors. We also have tonight Tammy Tunick, clinical therapist at Linden Oaks Behavioral Health, who also earned her Master's in Art and Clinical Psychology from Governor State University. Tammy has over 8 years of experience working with adults and adolescents affected by mood and anxiety disorders, co-occurring and substance abuse disorders. She utilizes CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectic behavioral therapy, and motivational interviewing to assist her clients in identifying their strengths, set goals, and find self-empowerment through counseling. So please give a warm welcome to our wonderful presenters this evening.
Thank you, Tim. Just want to make sure everyone can hear me okay. I just also wanted to thank everyone for attending tonight. I know that it has been an extremely stressful, probably year and a half since COVID hit, so please give yourselves credit, because everyone here and everyone involved in the schools is a rock star for everything that they've dealt with, so please, give yourselves that validation. But to get things started, so what will be covered in this presentation? So as a parent or a guardian, you might be wondering, what is anxiety and what does it look like in teens? Although there are similarities between anxiety in adults and in teens, one of the biggest differences is that teens really do struggle with verbalizing their anxiety, whereas adults kind of have more of the insight to be able to talk about it and what's actually triggering them. Also, how can you talk to your child, with your child about transitioning back to school? How can you help your child with their concerns or their anxieties? How to help your child establish a routine of going back every day in person, since for some people they were doing online and now it's transitioning back to school for the first time in a long time. And then what can you do to assist your child to develop motivation and stamina to attend school all day? All right, so what exactly is anxiety? Straight from Merriam-Webster's, it's an abnormal and overwhelming sense of apprehension and fear, often marked by physical signs such as tension, sweating, and increased pulse rate, by doubt concerning the reality and nature of the threat, and by self-doubt about one's capacity to cope with it. So to put it, I guess, more in simple terms, it's a feeling of worry or unease about some kind of event and not knowing the exact outcome of it. So anxiety it's a normal emotion and it's a very common experience. The thing that we have to know about it, though, is that it becomes problematic when it's day in and day out and it becomes overly consuming. It is one of the most basic human emotions, so I encourage you that if you are having a child experiencing anxiety, the best thing you can do is to normalize it and let them know that they are not the only person that is experiencing this. In general, anxiety serves to motivate and protect an individual from harm or unpleasant consequences. So even though it seems like it's a negative emotion, it's actually something that is very helpful. For example, if you are driving down an expressway and someone suddenly slams on their brakes right in front of you, you don't really have a lot of time to think about it, but your anxiety will help you to know what to do in that moment, and which is obviously to slam on your brakes as well and keep you from crashing your car. So there's things that anxiety can help you with. As well as, another example is, going to the doctor if you are having anxiety about your health in order to take preventative measures for any medical issues. Another way that anxiety helps is, especially for teens, is preparing them for tests and exams and things like that. So oftentimes we can confuse general worry with what anxiety actually is. So I wanted to kind of break that down a little bit. So worry resides more in our minds, whereas anxiety affects both our minds and our bodies. Worry is more of a cognition, where anxiety is more of an emotional experience. Worry is more specific, and anxiety tends to be more generalized. So if you are worried about, let's say, paying your phone bill on time, that is a little bit more specific, versus if you have anxiety constantly about your finances. That would be kind of a difference there. Worry is more realistic, whereas anxiety stems from catastrophic thinking. So for example, if you are having an argument with your significant other, if you are worried about it, you tend to say things to yourself like, I know that we're arguing and I'm worried about it, but I know that we will eventually figure it out. If you have anxiety about that, you can start thinking worst case scenario, like we're going to break up because of this one argument. Another one can be if your child is worried about you not being home on time. Maybe they are able to rationalize and say, I understand that there's maybe bad weather or there's traffic, and I know that that's maybe why my parent isn't home on time. But if they're very anxious, they might start thinking things like they got into an accident and they died. So again, that very catastrophic thinking. And worry is a lot more kind of planning and solving. Worry tends to be more temporary again, and anxiety is more long-standing. And then another big difference is that worry typically doesn't impair our functioning. Usually once the stressful event or the, whatever the trigger is, once that goes away, usually our stress kind of goes down. Whereas anxiety, it definitely can impair our functioning. It can affect things like our job, our daily activities, our social life, again, because we're constantly expecting the worst, and it does cause that physical distress, which we'll get more into in a little bit. All right, so the next thing we'd like to go over are some common anxiety symptoms. First one can be heart palpitations. That is something that, teens can maybe start to feel their heart racing. They can also start to feel a tightening in their chest. They can also start to experience some kind of numbness or tingling. Another thing with numbness and tingling or those physical sensations is that, you can start to feel your face getting warmer. Your hands and your feet start to get colder again because there are physiological changes that are happening in the body. There can be a lot of fidgeting going on, whether that's with their hands, females might be playing with their hair, things like that. They can become short of breath or experience heavy breathing. Some dizziness may occur. blurred or distorted vision, nausea, sweating, stomach aches. I really want to kind of highlight the stomach aches because that tends to be a pretty common anxiety symptom in teenagers. If your kid ever has approached you with a stomach ache, it's really important that we can figure out whether that's actually something medical or if there is something that they're really stressing out about and really anxious about. You can also experience muscle tension. Nail biting is also a common one. Feeling like there's a lump in your throat, tapping of your foot or your fingernails, genuinely just shaking, having the feeling of butterflies in your stomach. And again, it's okay to have butterflies in your stomach if you are, really nervous about something, but again, once that thing subsides, it usually goes away. But if there's a general feeling of butterflies in your stomach and there's really no actual threat or reason why, it could be something to look into. Having a lump in your throat, again, I apparently wanted to really stress that one because I put it on there twice. Another one would be headaches or migraines, difficulty concentrating, and also irritability. One thing with irritability is that we've talked about a lot while in our program is that anger and irritability is typically a secondary emotion. So really, it's not anger that's actually going on, it's usually something that's going on underneath. All right. Some common sources of anxiety, new situations or transitions. So again, as we've talked about, for some of your teenagers, this may be their very first time attending high school, especially high school in person. So it's definitely a pretty big event for them. Moving could also be a really big event. There's also worries about being judged or evaluated by others. This really kind of stems from a social anxiety piece and really fixating on, how will others perceive me? Again, school anxiety, this is really, school is a really big stressor. Tammy and I are both, I'm an adolescent therapist now, but Tammy works with adults, and our census really goes up quite a lot in the, fall and springtime because school is such a big stressor and we tend to get more students in our program then. There's generally concerns about the future, world events, germs, or medical health. Separation from loved ones, again, if this is coming from like unresolved grief. Trauma is also a common reason for anxiety. It doesn't necessarily have to be, a natural disaster or some kind of abuse that has happened to someone. Trauma is very subjective to each person. So one thing that is traumatic for one child may not be traumatic for another child, and I think that's something to really pay attention to. If your child has ever experienced a panic attack, there's fear of having panic attacks specifically in school and feeling like other people are going to notice them having panic attacks. Performance anxiety, specifically for teens, this is that pressure that they feel that they have to get really high grades, or they feel that they have to perform very well in sports or any kind of extracurricular activities. There's also stress from illnesses, from medical illnesses, and I also want to point out that if there is a medical illness going on, it's really important to rule that out versus just thinking that it is stemming just from anxiety, because there could be medical conditions that can exacerbate anxiety as well. And then obviously with the pandemic, there's a lot of worry that goes into that. If there's going to be any risk of exposure, teens can be doing things like checking their phones constantly for updates about it, and worrying about what's going to happen with their friends or with school or their families and things like that. So again, these sources are really important because with school anxiety, some of these things could also be going on at the same time. So there's just a lot that could be contributing to why your child may be feeling anxious during the school year. All right. And then we're going to talk more about, again, signs and symptoms of anxiety, but also highlighting certain behaviors. So they could be experiencing really intense, physical sensation like stomach aches or headaches and not wanting to go to school. Another one is staying home or isolating in their bedroom. So isolation is a kind of a tricky thing because some kids go to their rooms for just taking a break. So it's really important that you monitor what your child is actually doing in their bedroom. Are they just watching one of their favorite movies, or they're talking to their friends, or they're playing a game? Or are they just laying in bed and not wanting to talk to people and, just very unlike themselves? So that's really important to know like what that difference is. Another one would be leaving class frequently, going to the guidance office, nurse's office, wanting to stay home from school. They may not say specifically why, they just say, I don't feel good, or my stomach hurts, my head hurts. Again, all of those symptoms that could be really contributing to anxiety, or I'm sorry, that anxiety is contributing to. They're unwilling to engage in hobbies or extracurricular activities that they really genuinely loved. If your child used to love doing certain, they had really specific interests and they stopped doing that, dance or, listening to their favorite kind of music, those kinds of things. Those are really things that we want to pay attention to. Again, struggling with their concentration, focus, or retrieving information. There's a lot of research that shows that anxiety can definitely have an impact on our short-term memory. And then again, seeking reassurance from support. You may hear your child say things like, will they like me in school? What will my friends think of me? What if I fail? And if this is happening quite a lot, it is something to really try to look into further. Sleeping difficulties is also a really common one. We have this happen, quite often in our program where, patients will have really, a lot of troubles falling and staying asleep. They associate that with a lot of overthinking, or just generally being not able to relax at night. There's also a lack of appetite or overeating that can happen with anxiety. Especially, I feel like this happens in the mornings. So again, I can understand if a child isn't wanting to eat a big meal in the morning if they have a big test, that's understandable. But if your child is consistently missing meals, that would be a pretty big warning sign. And then constant fidgeting or increased restlessness. Another one that I didn't mention on here, and I should have written it down, is procrastination. That is a really, really big one that we see too. They, will avoid doing big tasks because it can seem very overwhelming for them. All right, so common sources of school anxiety. These are actually what I'll be going over with these is I've taken time to ask some of the patients in our program just so that I have an actual direct source for this. So specifically with school performance, I constantly hear, I'm really worried that I'm not going to get good grades. I used to get really, really good grades, and my grades started declining because I got anxious, and I'm really nervous to go back to school because either my parents or my teachers will expect me to get really good grades. So it's really important to tell them that you're not looking for perfection. You're looking for them to do the best that they can. There's also a pressure to succeed depending on where you're at in high school. Social anxiety, specifically lack of peer interaction. COVID changed a lot of things for these adolescents, and some of them unfortunately lost their friends. So they could be really nervous about seeing old peers or, not having any peers to talk to. Specifically with lunch, I found that a really common thing that they were saying is that, who am I going to sit with at lunch? And I'm going to have to be all alone, and that's really just a valid concern for them to have, and they, not having any classes with their friends and feeling like they don't have anybody to talk to. In general, classroom demands, I know that the students have mentioned, they're worried about having unfamiliar teachers, or just feeling very overwhelmed with the amount of homework that they might have to do. So making sure that there's a good game plan for them. Which again will fall into like falling behind on assignments. Extracurricular activities, if anyone is involved in them, making sure that they do have balance between school and their extracurriculars, and they still want to have some kind of social life and enjoy things on their own as well. And then there's obviously fear of school reclosures. That's definitely, I think, also a really big piece. So reminding them that the school has prepared a very long time for this. And then another one could be separation anxiety from families. If your child was with you for a pretty long time during COVID and having to be back at home doing virtual, they may have some separation anxiety because they're used to their room, they're used to being around their families and their siblings or things like that. So that could also cause some anxiety as well. So what can you do to help your child? As I've mentioned before, paying really close attention to their behavior is going to be a key piece. Even though your children may say they feel very excited that they want to go back to school, they may become overwhelmed within the first couple of weeks. So it's important that we watch for those signs of anxiety that I mentioned before. You want to watch out for isolation. You want to watch for if they're being fidgety, if they start to lose interest in things that they normally love doing. Another big thing is staying in touch with their teachers, sending an email and just making sure that they are participating in class, that they don't have any behaviors that they're concerned about, such as like being withdrawn, more quiet, having really poor eye contact. Those are some things that would be key to watch out for. And then another one is staying in touch with their pediatricians or their therapists. If they don't have a therapist, that's okay. Their pediatrician knows some of their history and can definitely provide some information and referrals for that. And just letting them know that it is 100% okay to ask for help. Communication is a huge piece to this as well. And again, I'm getting a lot of input from the the patients themselves in our program. So connecting with them on their level is going to be really helpful because you can talk to them about some of their common interests, whatever that is. It could be music, it could be, things that they watch online, it could be games, anything really to meet them at their level. You can also change locations to have a conversation with them so they don't feel like they're always like at home and being, questioned about certain things because that can get overwhelming for them as well. So if you can, if they want to go for a walk or a drive somewhere, that may be something that could really spark them to have more open communication with you back. Picking a time to talk with them would also be helpful. I also heard a lot of the adolescents say, I'm just so drained when I get home from school, and sometimes it's overwhelming if I get asked, how was school, or what did you learn today, or are you okay? That can feel overwhelming for them at times, so just kind of checking in with them, is this a good time for us to talk about school, or asking them if they need a break for a little bit, and then setting up a time to be able to talk to them at, at a later time. Asking your child about their stress or anxiety, and that could be some kind of rating scale, and that could be something that you work with your child about, asking them, what does it feel like when your anxiety is at a 1? Kind of help me understand, and then what does it feel like as your anxiety goes up on that from like a 1 to a 10? That way you can pay attention to those behaviors as well, because sometimes it may be hard for them to verbalize that, and they just may need some prompting. And as I mentioned before, even if they seem to be doing okay, checking in with them. I have had multiple family sessions with our patients, and parents will check in with them quite often, and then a few weeks will go by and they feel like, okay, great, my child is doing a lot better, maybe I can kind of ease off, and then I hear from the child, my parents stopped checking in with me. And they actually really like that. Even though they may seem to be doing okay, they really do appreciate that consistency from parents. And again, letting them know that you are doing everything you can to keep them safe along with the school. The school has, again, been preparing this for a very long time, so staying in contact with the school is going to help ease their anxiety. Along with communication, active listening, reflecting, and validating. It's really good to ask your kid, what is it that you need from me right now? Sometimes they don't always want the solution. Sometimes they just need to be heard and validated that what they're going through is real and it's something to actually have a concern about, even though it may seem, irrational to us. And letting them know that, yes, this is difficult and I'm sorry that you're going through this. I think that's what I wanted to say. So other things that you can do. Addressing certain addressing uncertainties or anxieties, and then being factual with your information. If you are yourself unsure, then that is totally okay, and you can tell your child that right now you're unsure, but you're going to go ahead and check for them and let them know at a later time. Reviewing information with them about how the virus and germs are spread if they are really anxious about COVID and returning back to school. Another good thing would be to actually, create a list of questions that they have, so that way they feel very supported. And being flexible and prepared if changes happen in school. Again, I can't, thank everyone enough for everything that they've done for their kid in the last year and a half. So just remind them that you guys were able to do this before, and it's something that you'll be prepared to do if absolutely need be. You can always encourage the hand washing, letting them know to speak up if they feel any symptoms, because we also hear, not only are they worried about getting COVID, but they're just worried about spreading it to other people. And obviously just making sure that while they're in school, they are wearing their mask on at all times, obviously unless they're eating, and whatever the school policies and things like that are. And then also focusing on the positives, letting them know that, they're part of a team here, which really empowers them to feel like they are making a difference here. And socialization is really key to teen development. So as nervous as they are to go back to school, just reminding them about how this is really going to help them for things in the future and how they can learn to form healthy relationships. They talk so much to us about how they miss their friends. So just remind them, like, you'll be able to see your friends again. And another big thing is just to remind them that that school is a place that really will help them focus more, because they have mentioned to us before that being online and being in their room was a pretty big distraction for them, and that's what made them feel so overwhelmed with school assignments and things like that. So school and the environment really is a great place for them to get back on track and have that routine. Bringing up positive memories about school, whatever that is, or encouraging them to think about positive memories from school that they had before and that they could potentially have again. And then reminding them of their abilities. So just to let them know that they are very resilient and flexible, and they have such a great amount of strength to be able to adapt to the things that have happened over the last year and a half. So that once they're back in school, they'll be able to adapt to that again. Bringing them closer to their goals. Talking about goal setting would be really important, and Tammy will get further into that, talking about SMART goals, but that is, again, another thing that you can work with them on. And then also encouraging consistent attendance. As much as, they are not wanting to go to school, important that they continue to go to school and work through that anxiety if it really truly is anxiety that they're experiencing. Because the best way that you can get through your anxiety is to challenge yourself and put yourself out there, and that's going to help reduce it. And again, preparing them for things that will happen in the future. So with that, I will turn it over to Tammy.
Hello, thank you. We are getting there. So I'm going to be talking about 3 more points: helping your child establish a routine of going back to school full days in person, helping them develop stamina, and some additional resources. All right. As a parent, I know I followed this rule sometimes: do as I say, not as I do. And that sounds great, but we know it doesn't work. And we know this because children model what they see us do. This is based on a social learning theory by Albert Bandura. Most humans' behavior is learned observationally through modeling. From observing others, one forms an idea of how behaviors are performed, and on later occasions, this coded information serves as a guide for action. So we know as parents, we play a pivotal role in our children's development through their whole life. It doesn't end. My son is 22, and I still feel like I'm parenting him because there's new problems and there's new issues, and so I have to model behavior all of the time. I have I think it's a fun video that gives us a good example of the role of a parent I might have to hold this, yeah? It's a good example from a child's perspective of what they see and how it can affect how they behave.
Okay, I'm signed in. Okay. Hello. Hi Jennifer. So, guys, you have to guys, be quiet. Go take your clothes. Yeah, sorry about that. So tonight is gonna be fun. Yeah. Yeah. So we're yeah, the dog is very crazy. Yeah, I know what you mean. So yeah. Yeah, it's hard to multitask, you know? Yeah. So, we're just going very well, and everything's going good. So, yeah. Hold 1 second. Guys, you have to go upstairs and get ready. Okay, yeah, sorry about that. They're just, I'll have to call you back a little later. Yeah. The kids are going all crazy and I'm about to get on a Zoom call. Yeah, sorry. Okay, turn that. All good. Okay. Guys, I'm in a Zoom call. Please leave. Do not come in.
Who has done that? Who has modeled that behavior? Oh, I see you snapping. I have modeled that behavior, and I'm teaching you guys this, so I don't know. Yeah, it is kind of funny, right? But this is what our children see. Some of the things I took out of this video was she's like, it's hard to multitask. But what was she modeling the whole time? Multitasking. Not necessarily doing any of it well. Probably goes to bed at the end of the night and feels bad about how they didn't multitask well, but own that you can't multitask. Additionally, what I thought was interesting was she said, no, everything is good. Everything's fine. We're doing well over here. Does it look like they're doing well? Does it sound like they're doing good? Our children see that and they think, this is good. This is well. This is how it's supposed to be. I want to encourage you to be kind to yourselves and know that what you model, your kids will do. So, therefore, it's critically important to recognize our own anxiety. Here's a quick video on that.
So it's important for parents to be able to recognize their own anxiety and to be aware of how that gets expressed. For many of us, we find that we become a little more irritable, that we have more worries, it's harder to focus, that we may have physical complaints, headaches and stomach aches, and difficulty sleeping. And so to recognize those things when our mind kind of goes to the more negative side of things, or we're having any of those physical symptoms, that we need to take that step back and do things to take care of ourselves so that we can then be more appropriate in terms of our interactions with children and provide that support that they need.
Okay. What I like to point out on this is in one point she says to be able to take control when our mind starts to go to the more negative side of things. Later on as we go on, I'm going to talk about our negative brain bias and how we can use that to build on stamina. So we're going to work on establishing a routine of 4 ideas, practice days, time management tips, SMART goals, and a calm calendar. I know you see at the bottom, start early. And I know school is next week, so we're going to do the best that we can and know that many of these skills can be used throughout the school year and modeled throughout the school year as well. So practice days, we want to start a bedtime routine. Good sleep is a safeguard to our mental health. Chronic insufficient sleep can increase our risk for developing some mental health illnesses. And also, good sleep can help those who struggle with mental health to manage and cope with their symptoms better. This can include taking a warm bath, reading, listening to music, and meditating. Adults need, and you may laugh about this, 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. Who gets that? No one. Okay, adolescents need 8.5 to 9.5 hours of sleep. That sounds a bit unrealistic between school, extracurricular activities, homework, maybe holding a part-time job. However, we want to encourage our children to get as many of those hours of sleep as they can. The importance of sleep is within the first 10 to 25 minutes, we're hitting a stage 3 level of sleep, and that's critical to bolstering our immune system, and it allows our body to recover. So if our children are worried about illnesses and COVID and those types of things, even promoting with them, getting positive sleep can increase your immune system. That may help to let them know they do have some control over contracting some illnesses, right? Also, after about 90 minutes, we hit a REM level of sleep, and that's essential to memory, learning, creativity, and emotional health. All of those things are critical for education, so we want to encourage our children to be really getting deep into that sleep. As much as possible, we want to use bed as a place to sleep only, limit caffeine, have our room a cool, dark place, and avoid stimulating activities before bed. And I'm going to keep suggesting this. If you model that behavior, you'll see more of that behavior out of your children. I encourage you guys to start setting that alarm a little bit earlier every day before school starts next week. And this is true even, over winter break and stuff like that. Eat during times consistent with the school plan. No, there's no time like the present to do that, right? If you know when your child's lunch hour is going to be, encourage them to hold off on eating and get established to that so they don't get hangry, right? And they kind of get used to that. It's important that our children are getting 3 meals, good nutritious meals, or 5 small meals throughout the day. Increase their water intake. And as Dorothy said, a lot of times with anxiety, we're not terribly hungry in the morning, but if we want to be able to manage that better, having protein in the morning is ideal. It increases our focus and our ability to concentrate. This may be a little bit difficult. Some kids love a nap, but no naps during what would be normal school hours. If they do nap, we encourage you not to nap after 3 p.m., and naps should be no longer than 30 minutes. My experience with adolescents has been, well, 30 minutes, Tammy, 30 minutes, Dorothy, forget it. Like, I don't even want to take a nap. Fine. Because then we can stay on a better sleep cycle. What we don't want is these naps to get so long that they're starting to fall into those other stages of sleep, okay? Time management tips. So there's 8 points here. I'll highlight a little bit. Use a to-do list or an appointment book. The benefits of this is it ensures that we don't forget, and it reduces stress, right? So we may not get to everything in that appointment book, but at least it's written down. Prioritize your tasks. We want to encourage ourselves and our children to focus on what's most important and quickest. As we build on those tasks, we feel like a sense of accomplishment and maybe encouraged to do more. Break large tasks into smaller tasks, right? So we don't just go out and run a marathon. We train and we practice throughout, and then we're able to run the marathon. It's not necessary. When I looked at this entire presentation, it could be overwhelming, but if I'm like, okay, I'm responsible for these 3 bullet points, I'll do this one today and this one tomorrow, like that's more manageable for me, right? And then I feel a sense of accomplishment. I'm getting closer to my goal. Next is limit distractions if you can't get away. So an option here, and I know we're giving you guys lots of suggestions, you don't have to do all of these, but something might pique your interest. Record how much time is spent on disruptions and encourage your kids. Like, I don't have time to do all this homework, Mom. I don't have time to do all of these things. Ask them, how long did you spend on your phone? I think there's even some apps that can tell you how much you've spent playing a game and doing those things. And if we can have a real candid conversation about, well, you had 4 hours of time on your phone flipping through social media, let's work on bringing that number down and using it for something else. We can manage our anxiety a little better. Practice self-monitoring, so mark your accomplishments on that to-do list. This can make us feel good and do more. I'll be honest, on my to-do list, sometimes I end up doing extra stuff, and after I've completed it, I'll write it down so I can check it off. I mean, all the credit I can get, I'll take it, right? It's a win. Give yourself some time before tasks. So arriving early and not being stressed. I used to show up, I have to be there at 6, I'll be there at 6. Be there a little bit early. Maybe you're dropping your children off to school. Get a little bit early so they have a little minute to practice some of the skills that we're going to get to, that I'm going to encourage you to practice with me. Allow yourself some time to unschedule. So it's important to maintain balance. Our entire life does not have to be scheduled. It's great to have downtime, right? I think about when we were kids, like we would come home and that was it. You were out the door, you were hanging out. Everything wasn't constantly structured. And we are fine, so it's okay to your child not to be structured every minute of the day. Let yourself be less than perfect, because perfection is not a realistic goal, and we'll end up just quitting if we think we're supposed to be perfect. Focus on completing things at an acceptable level, and once you've achieved that, if you have extra time, maybe go back and do a little bit more on that school project or practice a little bit more, but get to that acceptable level. Dorothy talked a little bit about like doing your best. I think that's important, and it's important to be mindful that our best is different every day. So if I didn't get a lot of sleep or I'm just getting well from an illness, what I accomplished that day is my best for that day. And another day I may be eating well and everything's doing well and I get a ton accomplished. That was my best for that day. Just do your best for that day based on your circumstances. SMART goals is great for kids and adults. It's model setting realistic expectations and achieving goals and then moving on, right? So I found these worksheets just by using Google Images. You can see one is maybe more like kind of for adults, and then there's young, adolescents, and one is for little kids. But you might have even seen this at work. Sometimes your boss will ask you, or you may be the boss and ask to do setting specific goals that are measurable and attainable and relevant and based in a timely manner. So we don't just have to be doing something to be doing something, but setting SMART goals. We work with adolescents all the time on establishing a SMART goal, and they start to have a sense of accomplishment when they achieve a goal. Maybe it's been a while since they've really accomplished a goal that they set for themselves, because one of our main psychological needs out of 3 is autonomy, the ability to make our own decisions. So if we give our children the opportunity to set a specific goal that's relevant to them based in time, they will start to do more of that. Another option is a calendar to promote wellness. This could even be like a fun family activity. I just snagged this off of Calm. It's an app you can get. And every single day it has something that you can do. Again, you don't have to do these every single day, but it has some suggestions. One is like meditate laying down, or say go for a walk, practice pausing before acting. Other types of calendars are like a 30-day self-care calendar, doing something for yourself, or a 30-day writing of self-esteem. So calendars can be helpful. All right. We're on point 5 of 6. We're almost there. Helping your child develop stamina to stay in school all day. I'm going to highlight developing stamina by practicing gratitude, emotion regulation, distress tolerance, mindfulness, and at home. So remember when I said we were going to talk back about when the doctor was speaking about that negative mind, that brain. So it's important for us to know that we all have a negative brain bias, which means that our brain is Velcro for negative things and Teflon for positive things. That seems frustrating, and yet it was really important a long, long time ago for survival, right? We needed to be mindful of what was going to harm us and hurt us, so then we could be more prepared to protect ourselves. That has not left us through evolution. We still have a negative brain bias, so we have to challenge it all the time. One incredible way to challenge our negative brain bias is to practice gratitude every day. Dorothy touched on this before. Asking the kids, what was it like online? Maybe they can remember, God, it was so hard and I couldn't concentrate, and I didn't see my friends, and I felt lonely in my room, and it was loud in the rest of the house. So focusing on the positives, how might it be better, right? Maybe I'm going to get to see my friends, or I'll build a connection with a teacher I've never met before. I'll know somebody who can write a letter of recommendation for my next stage in life because I'm building a human connection with them. Our second main psychological need is connecting with people. So some benefits for the individual when we practice gratitude is increasing our happiness and positive mood. We're less likely to experience burnout, better physical health, less fatigue, and of course, better sleep. As you can see, there's a theme here, right? Sleep, rest, and eating, and greater resiliency. One thing that I think is fun is a gratitude jar. Lots of ways to do this, no wrong ways to do this, and you can start any time. But any kind of jar or a bowl in your house, you can use scraps of paper. If you're really fancy, you can write, I'm grateful for, and have little things. Have your child and you model, right? I am grateful for lunch today because we had so much fun laughing and joking around. What they're grateful for and why, and drop it in the jar. Now, I understand there's some days we don't feel like there's much to be grateful for. Our kids come home and they can't find anything positive, right? And that's their reality. That's why that gratitude jar is important, because we can pull it back out and say, well, let's look back at what you were grateful for last week, a month ago, just yesterday. And it reminds us and it challenges our negative brain bias. Okay, so we touched on DBT, that's dialectical behavior therapy. It was created to be an organized, systematic approach to creating structure and enhancing decisions. There's 4 main pillars, and I'm going to highlight 3 of the pillars, and in each of those pillars, we're going to talk about 2 skills. Again, this is really information dense. Pick out what works for you and come back to it later because it's being recorded if you want to address it again. So emotion regulation is one of those pillars, and it's a skill that works towards keeping an individual at lower emotional levels. The goals for emotion regulation is to understand your emotions and experience and decrease the frequency of unwanted emotions, decrease emotional suffering, and reduce emotional vulnerability. I'm going to give you 2 types, even though there's a list of them. One is opposite to emotion. I love when I really thought I was telling my adolescents something. I'm like, hey, have you ever heard a body in motion stays in motion? Have you heard that? Yes. They're like, yes, Tammy, that's Newton's law, first law of energy. I'm getting it wrong, but they knew, and they're playing field students, most of them, so I'll be like, yeah, very good. So they do know this. So that's what opposite to emotion is expressing, doing the opposite to emotion. So I'm sad, and I feel like sitting in my bed, and I do not want to get out. Do the opposite. Get out. Go sit with your family. Do the opposite to emotion. We encourage this all of the time. Then a body emotion stays in motion. If we're waiting for motivation to hit us, it's probably not going to happen. We need to do the opposite. I know this is true, like going to the gym, right? I don't want to go to the gym. Once I'm at the gym, I'm like, oh, this feels really good. I'm coming tomorrow. So we want to force ourselves sometimes to do things we don't necessarily want to do. Please is another thing. For emotion regulation, lots of acronyms in DBT, treating physical illness. We encourage you to use your primary care physician if you're noticing things, to rule out those things before we identify maybe if it is all mental health. Eat healthy, avoid mood-altering drugs. That's a whole other series that we can talk about. Sleeping well and exercise. Another pillar of DBT is distress tolerance, and distress tolerance emphasizes learning to bear pain skillfully and manage crisis situations. Some of the goals of distress tolerance is it moves your body towards your values while carrying away discomfort slightly. Important to identify what values are. Survive emotional situations, become free of having to satisfy the demands of any unhealthy urges, and letting go of realities you cannot control. A lot of times, adolescents really feel like they can't control much of anything, right? And I think that may be especially true now. So encourage them to identify what is it within your control? Sometimes the only thing that's within our control, and we know this as adults, is how we react to the situation, right? We're not going to change people's minds. We're not going to make it better, but we can control our reaction. So 2 types of distress tolerance skills is ride the wave. This is feeling an intense emotion and not acting. And we really do use that visual with the adolescents. Like, you're peaking and you're riding that wave down. We're not really challenging or acting or fighting against that wave. We're just kind of rolling with it, right? What happens if we sometimes fight a wave? We might just go down. We're better off sometimes just riding it. This builds confidence that we can handle situations. So if I ride the wave of my anxiety, every time I'm able to do that, I start to know I'm capable of this. I was really stressed out on Monday, and it's Thursday, and I'm still showing up. I got this. I rode the wave. Another way to use distress tolerance skills is a self-soothe, your 5 senses. We do this in a couple different ways. We encourage a lot of adolescents and adults, absolutely, to create a self-soothe kit, highlighting your 5 senses. So for an adolescent, this may look like something that they can toss in their backpack, keep in their locker, that they can go ahead and have at home as well. And it could just be simple stuff, right? It doesn't have to look like a self-soothe kit and it's obvious what it is. It can be pictures of loved ones. It can be that chapstick that tastes a certain way, a scent that, right, do you have some smells that bring you back home and make you feel safe and secure? Help your child, encourage them to develop their own self-soothe kit that highlights their 5 senses. All right. A third pillar of DBT is mindfulness, and that means to pay attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. The goals is to reduce suffering and increase happiness, observe and notice thoughts, experience reality as it is. We call that radical acceptance. Some things we just have to radically accept, and I feel like we've had to radically accept a lot of things lately. So that's a really good mindfulness skill. Reduce past and future thinking. Get engaged in the present moment. Refocus your mind when you're distracted. This is where I'm going to ask you to maybe be uncomfortable, but practice some of these skills with me. We're going to practice 2 mindfulness skills. The reason I'm asking you to do this is because all of this is well and good, and we're going to ask our kids, hey, why don't you just practice one of those breathing exercises? Why don't you try one of these things? And that's scary and uncomfortable. So I want to put you in a place where you can imagine what it's like to be your kid practicing a new skill by practicing potentially a new skill. So one is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Adolescents love this. Yeah, Dorothy? They love this. It's 5. It pulls on your 5 senses. I like to highlight, though, sometimes it can be more anxiety-provoking thinking. Is it 5 things I can see and 4 things I can hear, 2 things, right? So really, it's just a matter, we call it a grounding skill. It brings us to present. So I'm going to ask you to do that quietly. I'm going to ask you just to look around. What are 5 things you can see? What are 4 things you can feel? What are 3 things you can hear? 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. That activity can bring us right back to center. We're starting to escalate, we're getting worked up. Even as a parent, our child comes home, they're distraught, they're crying. What is it? I can't understand what you need. Yeah, give me a minute, I'm going to practice this. I'm going to ground. You want to ground with me? Let's practice this. Practice that with them, right? We get better at it. Sometimes not closing your eyes, but you can do this in your car when you're stuck at the train and you're really frustrated. Ground yourself to where you are. What can I see, taste, touch, feel? In any order that works for you. Breathing exercises are critically important. Another favorite of the adolescents, and they have a couple that they really like. We're going to practice Foursquare, but let me just show you, and maybe you'll do this with me too. I'd appreciate that. Roller coaster breathing. Looks like this. You would hold up your hand if you're willing to do that. You're going to take your index finger And you're going to inhale, up your thumb, exhale down. Up your index finger, down. Just go ahead and do that for yourself. Finish. It seems that breathing is obvious. We need it to live, and sometimes we're not breathing well. I can promise you there's been times I've been up here that I haven't been breathing incredibly well. So those kinds of skills ground us. Encourage your children when they're breathing to breathe from down here in their tummy and not keep the shallow breaths. Another one is rainbow breathing, or color breathing, we call it. So they can identify what color do they use and what represents anxiety for them. So if I were to say, my anxiety is red and my calm color is like yellow, right? So I would envision myself exhaling red and inhaling yellow. That's color breathing, whatever your child's color may be. This can work for anger, anxiety, any kind of emotion. Pull in the color that relaxes you, let go of the color that's causing you stress. And 4-square breathing is, I think, the pinnacle breathing exercise that our kids enjoy the most. Why this is a great skill, too, is it offers you the opportunity to visualize something so it draws you in and focuses your thoughts. Much like when we were doing roller coaster breathing, there was a sensory component to that. So 4-square breathing, and I'm going to ask you if you're comfortable closing your eyes for this. I want you to envision a box, and I want you to breathe up the left side of the box for 4 counts, and hold across the top of the box for 4, and exhale for 4 down the box, and hold for 4 across the bottom. If you can practice that one time on your own. Okay, that's a great skill at night to reset, sometimes 4 times around that box, and we're ready for a good night's sleep. Thank you for practicing those with me. Some of the things we can be doing at home, adolescents like this term too, recharging my emotional battery, right? My emotional battery is depleted, Tammy, Dorothy, we hear this. So we want to give space for downtime, ask open-end questions. I know that Dorothy had touched on this earlier, allowing them to set personal boundaries. You can tell me if you've done this before, but sometimes I'm not ready to go home after work. So I will drive around the block a couple times before I pull into the driveway because I know my family wants to talk to me immediately. I'm incredibly grateful that they do, and I also need to set boundaries. Really rough days, I may call and say, hey, when I come in, I'm going to need 15 minutes to myself, and then I'm going to be available to you guys. I'm modeling that it's okay to set a personal boundary respectfully, right? That's okay to do. And so you can imagine our kids need that time too. When they come home, they're not ready for, did you like school? What was good? On and on and on. Give them whatever, give them a space. Compromise on what that space looks like. Not to the point where it's avoidance, right? But you'll know that as parents. Asking those open-ended questions. What was the best part of your day today? What would you have done differently? What do you want to do again tomorrow? Those big open-ended. If we ask yes and no questions, we're going to get yes and no answers, and it's not going to move us very far. It will feel like an interrogation to our children. Remove the shoulds. I call this, and we've called this shoulding all over yourself. We do this as parents too. You know, I should have done that, and I should have done this, and I should have done that. That beats ourselves up. So when a child comes home, well, you know what you should have done? You should have gotten that assignment done sooner, and you wouldn't be in this position. That doesn't really help. That just builds guilt and or shame. So we want to encourage, what are you thinking? How do you think you might solve that problem? What do you think you might do? That sounds like an interesting plan. Do you want any support on that? Instead of the should, it has a tendency to close ears. I statements as much as possible, remove statements, and it builds trust. I had a friend who always says, when you're saying you have one finger pointing at the person and 4 fingers pointing back at yourself. I statements as much as possible. I remember I had a rough day the other day too. You know what worked for me was this. What do you think might work for you? Another thing is play, have fun with your kids. I was talking with Dorothy before, I'm like, I know that we had great Christmas presents growing up, and I know that we went on, like those, I had lots of whatever I needed growing up, essentially. Those are not the things I remember. What I remember is fishing with my dad or reading a book with my mom, like those time things. So spending time with your kids, making time for games. There's one game that's kind of fun, kind of borders on a great way to have a conversation. It's called Totinka. It's a Jenga game. And each of the blocks has a color code and it aligns to a question. There's self-esteem and there's different types of Jenga questions in there, or self-esteem questions in there. And it really gets the conversation going, which is a simple way to have a conversation with your kids instead of those rapid-fired questions. And then just chill and relax. I'm going to share a number of resources with you after one final video. And the reason I'm showing you, well, we'll see if you can imagine why I'm showing you this video.
Most of our reactivity towards our children comes out of fear.
So what is one of the biggest mistakes that you see parents make that is a universal?
I think that we operate out of fear. The greatest mistake I believe parents make is that we are fear-based. And if we're really honest with ourselves, if we ask, am I saying this out of abundance? Yeah. Am I freaking out over my kid right now because I'm just coming out of abundance? And I trust and I surrender? Or am I freaking out because I'm terrified my kid will be homeless and I will then feel terrible about myself? Oh. And that's the ultimate knock. It's not how bad my kid's life will be, but how bad I'll feel that my kid's life is so bad. So that's why we all want our kids to be happy, because we feel good. But just that goal of wanting your kid to be happy is so utopic and so silly, really.
But so cultural, like you even hear that, what do you want for the atypical spiritual types?
Yeah.
What do you want for your child? Well, I don't care what they do as long as they're
happy.
happy.
Yeah, and I don't say,
Wow.
I may say it if I've fallen into some stupor of culture.
Yeah.
But most typically, I won't even use that word because
that's so
I know that I
interesting.
don't really want that for my kid, because that's impossible to want.
Yeah.
I want my kid to live her life, their authentic life.
Wow.
And if their life happens to be one where they are, being ravaged by storms or tsunamis, or,
Dealing with depression.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to make her feel like, oh, she's just wasted her whole life.
Damn, I failed.
Yeah, I failed.
Yeah.
Your whole life is a cross. Cross it out.
Wow.
Do we live authentically or do we try to be happy? And I want to be authentic. So if I'm crying all day, like say even today, if I cried all day, I won't look at it as a bad day. I look at it as an intelligently authentic day. I obviously had reason to cry. And I cried. And then I'm happy another day, and that's that day. And then another day is a dissatisfied kind of bored day, then that's that day. I don't take any of it seriously, really.
Yeah.
The happiness, I know it's very fleeting. And so is the sadness. So I'll cry, big deal. And so I'll be happy, big deal. None of it really touches the core of who I am, which is just presence, right? We are ultimately just beings who are here. We've put all this pressure on ourselves to be happy and then to be successful and then to go to this kind of college and then to have this kind of job and look this certain way. And we don't accept ourselves, and we loathe ourselves, really. And then we loathe our lives and we compare ourselves to other yardsticks, and we are miserable. And so the only antidote is radical acceptance. Tara Brach has this beautiful book called Radical Acceptance.
Yeah.
That's the only answer, is radical authenticity, radical acceptance.
Radical honesty.
Radical honesty, and radically not giving two F's about anything else.
So as Dorothy had said before, anxiety and worry are normal reactions, right? And feelings. There are resources to help ourselves. There's resources to help our kids, which I'm going to share with you. I want to encourage you to come from a place of normalizing and validating and not feeling like you have to do this all on your own, because there are a number of resources. Here's some books for parents. I want to highlight two specifically. just because I think it's different. The 5 languages of children, love languages of children. Have you guys ever used a love language book? Yeah. What I love about these books for parents and for and as even being married and all of those types of roles that we play are maybe there's 5 languages. Maybe my child's love language is acts of service, right? Acts of service means that they do things for me, and that's how they show that they love me. But that's not my love language. My love language is words of affirmation. And my kid never says, thank you, Mom. So I don't really feel loved. Once I know what my child's love language is, and I see, oh, look at him. He cleaned up his room without being asked, or he did something without being asked. He's showing me love. I need to respect that that's the way he shows love. And that's true for us too. Another thing we can say is, even though I love words of affirmation, that doesn't really move my child, but I know that they love acts of service. So let me make them a special lunch today, or let me drive them to school today even though they could take a bus. Learn what your child's love language is and speak to them in that love language. And encourage them to know what yours is too, depending on the age of your child. The person we just saw, Dr. Shafale, she writes The Conscious Parent. That's a very good book too. And she really talks on those, I touched on the 3 psychological needs: autonomy, making our own decisions, mastery, being good at something, and connecting with people. It's a really helpful book for that. I'm going to quickly look at this, workbooks on anxiety. Please don't overuse these books. You can be your parent. There's so many other things that you need to do. You don't have to do a workbook with your kids. However, depending on the level of care that your child may be in, this may be beneficial for some parents. There are relaxation apps for teens. Also, some of these are good for adults too. One of my favorite words is free. All of these are free. So check them out. Calm is free for a short minute though, and then they're going to get you. But Insight, it's a free app. Good for both parents and teens. Again, modeling yourself using these apps will bring up that social learning theory. The kid sees us using the app, using it for a guided meditation. It will definitely cross over and they'll start using it too. You are not alone in this. There is individual therapy as an option. Typically that'll be 1 time a week. Group therapy, there's lots of different locations. We don't offer this, but I would encourage you. There's other places that offer social skills groups, mindfulness groups, and coping skills groups, and there are programs the kids drop in once a week, almost like a camp or something, and it's not therapy-based so much as skills group-based. Medication management, family therapy, again, that goes right back to that modeling. With this, we can increase effective communication. The highlight word is effective, and set clear and consistent healthy boundaries with our children. There's support groups for parents and kids, and hospital-based programs. If you're looking at inpatient, that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's usually highly suicidal, really high-risk populations. Partial hospitalization would be a 5-day-a-week program for 5 hours, and intensive is 5 days a week for 3 hours. For us, it's true. If your child were to require that level of care, there is a school tutor and they get 1 hour of school, so that kind of helps to manage the anxiety as well. We've had incredible luck working with the school liaisons at all the Plainfield schools. I can tell you their names first and last. They're so passionate about your children, and they really will work closely with us and our school liaison to make sure that your children get the care that they need while managing their school to manage their anxiety. Here's some contact information for you. Our assessments are free. You would contact that number. Here's Dorothy's email and my email if you need any additional referrals or information, or there's anything that you have for us. Did you want me to take questions? Are we good? We're wrapping up. Okay. Thank you so much for your time.
So please help me in giving a round of applause to our presenters. They did a phenomenal job. So we will have time for questions. I just want to, before we get to those, let you guys know again, we are recording. We will shut off this recording in just a minute. The PowerPoint that you saw, I saw a lot of people taking pictures. Those will be posted on our website as well, both in English and Spanish. The recording of this presentation we're hoping to get up there pretty quickly as well. The Spanish version will take us some time to translate, but we will have that up there as well. Educators, if you're looking for CEUs or CPDUs, we do have a sign-up sheet outside the door here for you to sign up. We'll get your email and send those out to you. Within your program, every program does have a survey. Our committee does use those very often to determine what our next presentations will be. Since we are in the very beginning of the school year, we really do encourage you to fill that out, give us some good feedback and any ideas for future events. And then, last but not least, we do want to offer time for you to have some questions. So we do have a microphone out there. If you wouldn't mind coming up again and just answering some questions, if anybody has some, raise your hand. We'll come around with a microphone, or if you've got a loud voice and comfortable shouting it out, be our guest. So again, thank you for your time this evening, and we'll turn it over to you for questions.